Before we kind of dive into the cool tools, let me ask you straight. What's been your and Cedar Health's relationship with AI so far? So are you the early adopters, or you like the wait and watch types, or do you secretly think that AI is the antichrist?
Cedar Health Research actually started as Aspen Insights about 6 years ago. So the three founders of Aspen Insights won a hackathon at Lockheed Martin, and their project was taking data from EMR and using that data to match patients for clinical trials. I don't know how they came up with the concept, Ayush, but I wouldn't be sitting here today if they didn't. And the title of the company, Aspen Insights AI, was on purpose. What happened was, as they were starting to build the tool, they realized they had nothing to test it on. So they were trying to find site networks to work with. And they thought, well, why don't we just build our own? So they built Cedar Health Research from scratch. And the model for Cedar Health Research was actually predicated on being able to use that tool to be able to find patients from EMRs. So we have right now 42 practice partners in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area that we work with. And then we have access to their EMRs through a BAA, a Business Associates Agreement. And that's how we find a large portion of our patients for clinical trials. We use that tool to sort through the data to find patients for trials. So it's a matching tool. It's not perfect. The data in the EMR is not perfect, so the matching isn't always perfect. But that's something that we continue to enhance. We've got another version that we just rolled out of the tool. We're looking at other ways to augment what we're doing there to kind of narrow the funnel. And there are some other AI tools out there right now that we're investigating. So I would say that I would necessarily say that we're early adopters, but we're certainly not taking a wait and see attitude right now. We're looking at everything that we can leverage to make our processes better to find the right patients for trials.
Let's zoom out a little bit. And imagine I give you a magic button, a magic AI button, right? You press it, and one part of the clinical trials become 10 times better overnight. What are you fixing first?
I led with it, and I'm gonna go back to it, because I do think that we're sitting on a goldmine of data. And whether it's within the clinic charts, whether it's the EMRs, the data that we have from previous trials, for us, just as a site, there's a ton of data. And using that natural language processing to be able to pull out information. So I'll give you an example. When we're running an Alzheimer's trial right now, first time in Alzheimer's, study's going pretty well. We have found, as we have gone through the EMR, that there are a number of records that are PDF'd and scans and images, just things that we can't access easily through our current technology, our current forage system. And using natural language processing, we can extract that information and be able to sort through it and determine. For example, with these patients that have Alzheimer's or mild cognitive impairment, there may have been some assessments that are done. There are a number of different tests that are done on these patients to determine whether they have Alzheimer's or not. Those are generally just scanned into a chart. So it's not easy for us to pull that information out. So I think I just think there's a lot of upside to using NLP to determine what types of patients would be a good fit for a trial. And that's our selfish way of looking at it. But I think as you just back up and look at all of the data that's out there, it's very disparate right now. And we've got to figure out a way to pull it together to be able to make it more useful.
Let me flip this question. What's the nightmare scenario? So what's that one thing that makes you think, yeah, maybe AI shouldn't be running this as of yet?
I haven't seen it. I mean, I haven't felt it yet. I think people talk about, I think there is one area that we have to be careful about, and that's the patient data and who owns that patient data. So I think there's there's always a concern in our industry around, HIPAA and making sure that data is used in the right way, following 21 CFR Part 11, for all the different technologies that we use. But, we talk about, and I know you do too, de-identified versus identified data and using only de-identified data. But at what point does that de-identified data become identifiable?
Correct.
And it's a slippery slope, I guess, that we need to be concerned about. So I think that's the one thing that I get worried about is we have all this data, we have this patient data, and we do our best to protect it. But clinical research industry, a lot more precise in the way that we do things, and a lot and faster. I'm not going to say a lot faster, but I think we can speed things up. And I'll give you another example. I know IBM Consulting, I was reading an article. They are working with a pharma company to speed up the approval process using agentic AI. So there are a whole series of things that, as you know, because you're much more in touch with this than I am, switching from ANI to AGI, all of these new novel things that are taking place in AI. But IBM Consulting was talking about how they were able to work with this one company and speed up the approval process by just looking at all of the other approvals they had done and refining the process. And I think that if we continue to multiply it is going to help this industry move faster. And what that means at the end of the day for people in the US and outside the US is we can get drugs to market faster.
Yeah.
And so, as we were discussing before about, what would you say to somebody, at the dinner table about why it takes so long? This is where I think we can speed things up. It may not take off 10 years from the process, but if you could take it just a couple of years off the process, you could save a lot. And, we have a lot of really interesting things going on in Alzheimer's research and, things that would really move the needle as the population gets older and we have more cases of things like Alzheimer's. So I think that's interesting. I think the other thing that is going to be, I think, very interesting is this reasoning AI, and being able to apply that to some of the things that we do in the industry. And I'm not even going to be able to touch that right now because I don't know enough about it to talk about it. But it seems like there are a number of areas where that could really help us from a development standpoint.